Right. Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Nigel, and I would like to thank you for this workshop opportunity within the 2022 Extended Census Symposium. I'm about to begin the final registration year of my PhD at the Royal College of Art. As indicated in the program, the working title of my doctoral thesis is Towards Symbiotic Artificial Intelligence Integration, or Choreographic System Design. Today, I would like to start off with a brief overview of the research, followed by a live demonstration, and then a question period. One of my research participants is here today to help illustrate part of the system I have been building over the last few years. As future outcomes of this research are geared towards wider application, I would also like to enlist your participation for the latter part of the demo. And for some context, technologies developed in Silicon Valley, such as facial recognition and advanced online security, can have significant perceived value. Yet user trust in the motivations behind the data collection methods used to strengthen the artificial intelligences, or AI, that drive these applications has recently been declining. Consequently, some of the big tech companies have sought new AI applications to prolong or expand economic gain from online user behaviors. One such approach is the adaptation of gait recognition technology to record our identities through body movement. Few other mediums propose a sufficiently rich context to foster a human-led integration of these advancements than contemporary dance, particularly when considering technologies related to the body. This research therefore investigates how AI might affect the creation of choreography. While we've been doing a sturdy working process, which I'll give you a bit of information about. Over the last few terms, I have been developing a series of methods and techniques to help investigate a key objective of my practice-led research project, which is to create a choreographic system that integrates algorithms within its construction. This system aims to draw attention to our corporeal identities that can be captured using human gait recognition technology, and which, I propose, are presently supporting an imbalanced information economy. Considering the impetus and sequence of vibrations between two dancers or between an algorithm and the dancer or dancers, could propose a useful illustration of a creative process affected by artificial intelligence. And now we'll move on to the demonstration. I would now ask you to kindly direct your attention to our dancer participant. He will begin by showing you an original phrase of movement, which was created using some structured improvisation techniques I have learned and practiced over the years. We layered different forms of stimulus, ranging from word association, physicalation of terms or concepts, verbal cues, silence or the removal of sound, musical scores, and so on, to eventually settle on what we have tentatively called phrase B. No physical vibrations were employed in its initial creation, which is the version he will now perform. We trialed this with a musical score after the material was created and felt it worked well performatively. For time efficiency, the wiring of the wearable that he is currently wearing is already mounted in the garment, but is not being activated for this first rendition. I'm going to switch places. if the technology cooperates. It worked a few minutes ago, so I'm probably it's going to work again. We'll see how this goes. So we're now going to look at the same material, but with wearable technology activated. You will now repeat phrase B, this time with me remotely providing sequences of vibration to the motor embedded in the garment, which is in the front for this particular experiment. He does not know when I will press the button located here, or what sequences may be communicated. The only instruction here is to allow this additional level of stimulus to influence his performance. I'm just going to test it first.
We go
music, please. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Probably end there. Thank you very much. And lastly, as improvisation was a key component in building this choreographic material, I would now like to show a brief session, but with your help. I'd like to ask for 1 or 2 people from the audience to come down and replace my role. So we're just going to do improvisation here. No score. No score. Thank you.
Just to let you know.
We're 10 minutes in, so
This is
we're
the
just
last
cutting
bit.
into feedback time now. All right.
Thank you. Next person want to try? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very lovely, thank you so much. That was very restful. I guess, Nigel, if you'd like to come into the space between the two white pieces of tape, that would be wonderful for the benefit of the online participants. I guess I don't have a lot of, I've worked in performance and interaction, but I've never directly worked with a dancer before, and I just wondered if you had any information that you could share with us about the relationship that you've sort of formulated, and particularly with respect to sort of conversations around subjectivity and objectivity in the fact that you are in a research process rather than a directly creative process. I mean, that's a whole conversation about that, but I think if we could make that differentiation for the purposes of this conversation, that would be great.
So I didn't work with any dancers up until just this year, although I started in 2017. So the first several years of the PhD were around trying to figure out what kind of technology would work, materials to make that happen, and using myself as an immediate response. I come from a similar training to Jordan, but that's not exactly why I selected him. But there is a common language there for sure to begin with. So it is building certainly on my own kind of knowledge, but I was very conscious to extract myself, at least from the first workshop that we did. So I didn't want to choreograph him or to direct or provide too much instruction. And I tried to create an environment in a workshop that was as open as possible, and that much would come from his own lived experience to try and understand how that might affect the ideas I already had. So yes, there is some such subjectivity in the terms of me being in the research, in the actual thesis, heavily acknowledge that, obviously. But at the same time, being interdisciplinary between different worlds of the wearable tech, the kind of fashion stuff, AI and choreography is what the PhD is, and it comes from me, although I'm not an expert in all those areas. So subjectivity versus objectivity, I kind of had to vacillate between the two things and to be very cognizant and clear about those processes. And that's, again, why we've worked with one dancer initially, and we've added another one afterwards. And then I had them interact strictly with no involvement from myself. So I could try and understand maybe if there's some bias coming from me, if there's an effect in that direction.
And what control mechanisms do you think you've put in place in terms of how you're then translating that into something that could be understood as research? So what you talk about a degree of improvisation, but are there, in terms of the feedback and the way that you're recording data, how are you managing that?
So keep in mind this is specifically one practice workshop within a larger system, and this is one component of a whole system, which is why I wanted to workshop it and hear responses from that kind of thing, because I haven't presented it beyond the realm of my university so far. There's obviously an awful lot of ethical considerations and documentation that goes in place even before you begin these kinds of things. All of that was certainly put into place. The second part of your question was more about...
So how are you going to record and present that in
some
the
of
context
it,
of your PhD?
I've been lucky enough to be able to work in the studio in McGregor, which are completely closed spaces, and we need proper dance space to work. And all of it is recorded with a videographer for moving stuff, because I can't interact and try and record. Sometimes I just do interview and have discussions, and it's strictly audio. Sometimes it's audio and video when it's we're not having them dance the whole time. For me, it's very important about their responses as it comes naturally, and that was all recorded through photo, video, observation, lots of notes, and their own written notes to my provocations as well.
I suppose humans are complicated, so it's difficult to get a sort of a yes, no, or they're nuanced experiences between the observer and the participant, and the experiencer of the technology acting on the body as well. So I think it is a challenge across a lot of these kinds of projects, and how to deal with that human experience and then distill it down into something that can then be discussed out with of the individual subjective experience of that
Yes.
testing.
And there are always lots of doubts, and you get a lot of questions, and you have to overprove in some context. But that particular company where the two participants come from, they've been working with technology for far longer than I have in various capacities. So if I had began with someone that perhaps came from a pure ballet company, for example, you're having to go a lot further just to get to kind of on the same playing field. So within the scope of the PhD, I wanted to at least find kind of somewhere to start where we could go from there. So there's lots of confusion, there's lots of things which are unknown, but at least there is definitely, I knew there'd be a massive opening to want to understand how forms of technology can interact with our physical intelligence.
Lovely. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to open it to the floor now. Hi, we have one individual here. Is that Kate? Yeah, Katie. Great. If we could get Katie a mic, and I'm just going to check the online. I think we don't have online, so we can focus in. Yeah. No, that's great. Lovely. Thanks, Katie.
Hi. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Nigel. Just questions really about the wearable tech. I come from a dance background, and mine is looking at wearable tech and dance, my PhD. So I was just interested in terms of the vibrotactile stimulus that you're talking about. Are they on a loop? Is it patterns of vibration? What's happening underneath?
Right. So so in this particular setup right now, any form of algorithm or AI has not yet been added. That's happening in parallel. So it's actually a question I wrote in my provocation in case I didn't get any questions that I wanted to ask you, was to say, what happens what would your thoughts be about if an AI or an algorithm was kind of replacing my role? The algorithm that I have been co-creating with a statistician is actually built from my own motion captured choreography movement. So it is, from me, processed by an algorithm and then translated through the stuff that's on this participant to kind of get a sort of a loop in that respect. I'm interested in the unexpectedness, so I don't know what sequences of vibrations it's kind of gonna instruct or spit out, and that's just the nascent idea of how we can look at the integration of something which is in theory intangible versus something which is very tangible in this way.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that whole kind of like translation process as well. Like in terms of the dancer, I found with my participants it was very much the idea of some of them found it quite difficult to kind of take on board that tactile information while they were dancing, like as they were dancing, and then other people found that quite easy to do that. It's almost like, and also just the whole kind of idea of improvisation sort of just sparked loads of ideas. But I'd be really interested in talking some more with you. It's similar
Absolutely.
Areas that we're working in.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, it's if you we had not the same training, but particularly within modern techniques, for example, we both have an idea of what certain terminology is in that way, and you kind of started at least a pseudo-acceptable playing field to then go from there, which is certainly helpful.
Lovely, thank you very much. That's great. So we have over here and over here. I'm aware we have 3 minutes, so we could make our questions and answers concise. And online, so very, very concise. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is that when I was participating, I felt the experience pretty much like a question about control, like a very puppet. But and you talk about it as an influencing the dancing. And how do you, from this perspective of control, or how, because it's very hierarchical at this point at least, and are you thinking maybe in some feedback process, or what, I don't know how to...
Yeah, so the puppeteering question has come up quite a bit, in fact, and it, I think has relevancy, absolutely, and certainly in this case, there's agency of one perhaps over the other. It's just in a lot of the previous kind of experimentation that we've done, either with one participant or two together, it's been a different experience. And perhaps, we talked a lot about Jordan in this case making decisions about what he's going to actually follow, which is why we kept adding layers and removing them. Does he listen to the score? Is it the space? Is it an internal feeling? Is it the vibration? Does he ignore this or that? And some of the really beautiful stuff, at least for me, that came out of a lot of those experimentations is almost the sense of confusion is a bit strong, but the uncertainty, and something would happen physically, which like, oh, that's really interesting. And that stuff I think is quite valuable, and that's the stuff which was recorded blessedly in terms of the research process. But it changes an awful lot, and you're right, yeah. So right now it's me pressing a button. That's just to show a specific remote form of communication. But an algorithm will be deciding. I can pick algorithm number 2, and it will do a sequence, which again, the participant won't know what's coming down the pipe, so to speak. But the question of agency and the balance of those things is very much front of mind. And again, why I wanted to kind of just not see myself as a choreographer in the process, to try and elicit things or try and at least see things and let them come forth from them, the participants, versus me as the researcher.
Lovely, thank you so much. Going to do the online one, but then we'll come to you last time. Why did you decide to embark on a research approach to the creative dimension of our performance work? What do you feel it offers?
Why did I embark on a research approach?
I suppose as opposed to working directly in industry at this moment in your career.
I come from an industry background, which for a long period of time, and for me, I think it's very important to, as the title of the PhD says, I want to try and find ways of symbiotically creating or generating some form of, or working with forms of AI, and I think that, at least for me, it's important that they're human-led, depending on how they manifest later on, and for me, it's about creative processes, which could be applied later. I use the medium of contemporary dance because it's the stuff I know the best, but it is a medium as one portion within the research to hopefully apply later on to other creative processes. Yes, I could have done just a lot of, could have done live performances, and I could have done that kind of thing, and I hope later that will happen. That's part of the, raising awareness and illustrating this kind of system to a larger audience. But I need to understand what it really means from a much more, as you say, objective point of view, and what this can contribute both through creativity, artistic generation, material, as well as research itself.
I suppose it's the space to reflect, isn't it, as well in research. That's what a PhD allows you to do. It allows you to not suddenly, move on to the next thing as soon as it makes that space.
It also allows me, I'm not doing this to generate an income. It doesn't have a specific economic gain as a career, for example. It is very much about the questions that I'm asking. How do we create a choreography using AI that will hopefully have applications later on? And maybe the productions will become larger and it will turn into some form of, perhaps back to industry, but that really is, as you say, it's that space with the PhD that allows you to do that.
Great, lovely,
thank you. And one last very, very quick question, because we're a minute over, if you could manage to
Thanks for the presentation and the practice. My question is about how you navigated the choices of placement of the actuators and the physical nature of them.
So I was trained a lot in Graham technique, Martha Graham technique, when I was training in university, and before that, which often comes from the back, and the three terms of contraction, release, and spiral are kind of big pillars of the technique. And I actually had kind of came in with the supposition that I think that if we have actuations happening in the back, it will do something interesting. And in fact, during the first workshop process, some of the feedback that I got from the participants was like, actually, what if we put it on a wrist? What if we put it here? What would happen with those kind of things? So I changed the wearable design to kind of allow for that. So it's exactly that. We tried in one place and we kept moving, which is why we've got this kind of harnessy design going on. And there's actually, the next stage is there's a suit that goes on top, so the wiring is not a hazard, and so that perhaps two dancers can interact with one another in a much more safe manner. So I did decide initially thinking it would be somewhere in the back, because that's what it came from, and that's how I thought maybe it would do something interesting, but in fact it moved everywhere else because of the feedback that came from my participants.
Lovely, thank you so much. It's a lot of information there. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time. Okay.